Memoir podcast, episode number 2. This is me, your host, Sweta. And in this Mental Health Memoir podcast, we talk about different topics each time, different topics related to mental health. And as you may have seen in the title, today we will be talking about grief and loss. So, before beginning this episode, I'd like to thank everybody who's in this space and listening to me. Thank you so much. I would like to express my gratitude for that. So, thank you again. And grief and loss is a topic that was definitely on my list. I definitely had thought about covering grief and loss in one of my episodes. But to be very honest, I had not anticipated that I will be talking about grief and loss in my very second episode itself. So, the reason I am speaking about this topic in the very second episode is because of my recent experience with grief and loss. So, very recently, very fresh, I experienced grief and loss, and I'm still, going through that grieving process. So I thought that maybe this could be a good time for me to talk about that. So that's why I'm here. And also, just wanting to let you know that I will definitely be covering grief and loss in the future episodes as well. Maybe not straight away, but in one of the future episodes, I will be covering grief and loss again because I think this is quite an intense thing to talk about. So I definitely want to, I guess, give more time and effort to speak about that. So that's why I will be covering about this in one of my episodes in the future, which will be a bit more structured than what it might be or it's gonna be in the episode for today. So let's start with this topic, grief and loss. So the process of grieving can be one of the most difficult thing that anyone would ever go through, that anyone would ever have to go through. It's quite a difficult process. The process of grief and loss, like I said, it's one of the most difficult thing people or anyone would ever go through. And also, when we talk, I just want to just talk a bit about that. Is that when we talk about grief and loss, a lot of the times we might sort of associate grief and loss just only with death or only with losing somebody. But grief and loss can come in a lot of forms. So, for instance, I might grieve about losing my job for any reason that could be, but I might grieve about losing my job as well, or sometimes I might grieve about losing relationships, or I might grieve about the loss of a relationship or friendship or any kind of connection as well. So like again, grief and loss can come in many forms as such. So I just wanted to discuss a bit on that. And also I think grief and loss can be one of the things that we might often just in general try to, I guess, avoid or try to ignore, because sometimes just even talking about the loss, or just maybe talking about the grieving process can be quite difficult, or just in general life, we might just want to, I guess, avoid addressing it or just even thinking about it, because again it's not easy to do so. I don't want to go so much in detail again, but in terms of my recent experience with grief and loss, is that even though I've experienced grief and loss in the past as well, but just with the recent one, it came a bit of a shock for me, and I feel like I'm still in the, I guess, phase that I'm still feeling quite shocked, maybe not as before, but I'm still I guess kind of struggling to I would say, maybe not accept, but I think struggling to just come in terms with that. And we know about, I think most of us, we might know about the 5 stages of grief. And personally for me, I feel like there's a lot more stages of grief and not just 5 stages of grief. But I feel like I'm kind of juggling all of the stages all in one sometimes. So the way I dealt with my recent grief and loss experience, the way I think I've dealt with that is again, I'm still grieving about that, but when I heard about it, of course, it was very big shock for me. It was really hard to process. It was really hard to digest as well. Of course, I could not sleep the very first night, and then there were moments, where I just cried, which was healthy. That was very much healthy, very much needed as well. So I think slowly and slowly, I'm starting to come in terms with that. And I think slowly and slowly, I think I'm starting to accept that. So again, I don't want to go a lot in detail because I don't want this podcast to mainly be about me. It's more need to focus on the grief and loss. So I just want you all to, whoever's again listening to me, to just to reflect on how do you deal with grief and loss. How have you dealt with grief and loss in the past, or if you're still dealing with this process, how are you dealing with that? You can let me know in the comment section if you want to, if you feel comfortable to do so. You can I guess drop me a comment and let me know. Else, that could just be kind of like a self-reflection activity. Okay. um and like I said, it's definitely one of the most hardest experience of people, or even anybody. So it's one of the most hardest experience we'll ever go through. And it might sound a bit cliche, and this is something I think a lot of us again have heard about it, is that there isn't any right or wrong way, to deal with grief. I've seen people, who cry their heart out. I've seen people, who even after going through that process, even after weeks or months, or even after years of going through that process, they might still cry their heart out. Whereas I've seen people who might struggle, despite of the fact that the grief has hit them so hard, but they might struggle to um, even shed a tear. So of course, the grief can come in all forms, and not every and each experience is unique to each people. So everyone has everyone has their ways of grieving, and again, there's no right or there's no wrong way to, I guess, to grieve. And also, I guess, the thing about grief is that there's always going to be grief. There's always going to be that grief in your life. There's always going to be that understanding that, for instance, if you lost somebody, if somebody has died, there's always going to be that reminder that that person is not in my life anymore. The grief always stays with us, the pain stays with us, but it gets better. It gets better with time. When I say that it gets better with time, I'm trying to trying to focus more on saying that you learn to, I guess, live with that grief more and more each time. With each time, it gets better in that sense. Like I said, there's always going to be that reality or that reminder that I've lost people, or I've lost somebody, and they're not in my life anymore. For instance, I won't be able to see them anymore. That stays with you, but you just get better to accept, in terms of accepting that, and I guess living with that. Because when you go through grief and loss, of course, when you lose somebody, you lose a big part of your life. Your life won't be the same. And how can it be the same? You've lost somebody, that of course your life might not be the same, but again, you learn to live with that. You learn to live with, we may call it the new normal, right? So you might learn to live with that. So, and I think this is something that I guess is a very important thing to reflect on, is that pain will be there, but I will be able to learn to live with that. You know, and there's also one saying, I've read it somewhere, which I really really liked, and I think that's so true. Is that the only cure for grief is to grieve itself. So that means that one of the only way that you can deal with that grief and loss in your life is to grieve about it. And even though like again, there might be each individual's way to deal with the grief and loss, but it's it's, be really mindful that you are addressing your loss, you are addressing what's happened, you are addressing what part of your life has changed. And I do get it, for some people it might take a bit of a while to process that grief. I mean, for a bit of a while to even talk about it. um, a bit of a while, I guess, to accept that, and that is fine. That is fine. Do not push yourself, do not I guess, pressure yourself that I need to get out of this grief or I need to move on. I have seen people, again, for instance, that it might, after a month or so, they might question themselves and ask themselves, it's already been a month, why can't I move on? Or it's already, or the fact that, it's already been a week, or, it's been so many months, that I lost that person, but I'm still struggling. If you're one of those that are still in that are in this phase, remind yourself, reflect that, it's important that I be kind to myself, that I'm not putting any kind of expectation on myself, you know um, because when you're doing that, you are questioning your feelings, you are questioning the grief itself, you are questioning that, the grief shouldn't be here when it will be. Because again, you've lost something in your life which isn't an easy thing to deal with, and it will take some time. So just be really mindful of your expectation. Am I really being kind to myself or not? Am I, really expecting myself that I need to be able to move on, or have to move on? I understand that you are struggling in that moment. You are really, because the feeling of, the grief, is painful. I do understand that, but also be mindful that I'm not trying to push myself. I have to be really kind to myself, and allow myself the time and the space to grieve about it. Um, and also, when you when you are in that stage where you are grieving about something, it's really important, again, to let that out, let that emotion out. It's because the more you're gonna just keep it with yourself, the more it's gonna come to you. I guess the more hard and difficult it is for you to move on with that. And whilst we might not move on completely, that is okay. That's not even, I think it's I think, if we are expecting that we'll be able to move on completely, that's not a realistic expectation, right? So of course we might not be able to move on completely in our life, and which is understandable. But if you are in the stage where you want to, I guess, make sure that, even though this is hard for me, but I want to make sure that I am dealing with this grief in the most healthiest way possible, it's really important to let that grief out. Do not keep it with yourself, because again, one of the most common, I guess, responses of grief and loss would be avoidance, avoiding those feelings, or even distracting yourself, right? So for instance, let's say, if you notice that you are starting to, I guess, remember that person, even, or if you're starting to have, if you're starting to think about those memories, you might just try to distract yourself. Let's say you might just try to do something else, because that memory, or even just thinking about that person, can be a very difficult thing to reflect on, right? So you might just want to distract yourself, and for that, sometime that distraction might help you, right? Because you're just pushing yourself not to think about that person, pushing yourself not to think about the memory. So it might help you for a while, but that comes back again, because because you didn't deal with that, right? So it's going to come back again and again. So it's really important, to accept your loss, even though that's hard, but it's really important to acknowledge acknowledge your loss, and I guess address that loss in whatever ways you can. That is, I'm not just saying to talk to people if you're not comfortable, but in whatever ways. You could write about it. You could write about your loss as well, because in that way you are addressing your loss. You could do, you can sort of write about it. You can put it in any form that you want. And when you are, I guess, reflecting on your loss, you could reflect on different things about the loss. For instance, there might be some time where you can just reflect on, what did that person meant for you, or what was the best memories that you've had with that person, or what is the thing that you've learned from that person, or what are you proud of, or what do you think that person is proud of you. So a lot of things. Sometimes you can just maybe just feel, I guess, just maybe reflect on, how does this, what, about your pain, or how do you feel about that. So it's like when you're doing that, you are, you know, making sure that you are addressing your loss, because the more you do it, the more it's going to be easier for you to move on. Again, you might not move on completely, that's okay, because that's realistic, but you'll be able to move on in much better way, right? And when you're focusing on the person, the memories, the thing that you've liked about them, or what do you think they're proud of you about, so you're also honoring that person and the life that they've lived. So you're focusing on a lot of things in that instance, so it might again be helpful for you. And again, reminding yourself that it's only validated that I'm feeling this way, or I'm going through this process. Accepting your feelings and not trying to push it away, or not trying to, I guess, hide it. And in whatever ways you can, let those feelings out, even if it's through crying. I mean, I cry a lot, whenever I go through a situation like that. So even if it's through crying, you can let that out, because when you're crying, you're feeling the pain, you are acknowledging what you've been through, what has happened. So in whatever ways you can, acknowledge that pain. I know it's going to be difficult. I totally so agree, that it might be difficult. Some, even just by the thought of it, I'm getting quite goosebumps at the moment, I'll be very honest. But it's gonna feel so much better, in a way that you'll be able to move on slowly and slowly with that loss. So that's something that I guess quite helpful. And also, of course, not pushing yourself, but in whatever ways you can, look after yourself, look after your mental health, look after your physical health as well. Of course, when we lose somebody, for instance, like I said before, is that our life won't be the same. There might be change in many things. There might even be a change in routine as well, right? So even though we might not be able to get back to the same routine, which is fine, but as much as you can, try to, I guess, have a routine. Of course, acknowledge your pain, acknowledge that my life won't be the same, but try to get in routine in whatever ways you can. Not pushing yourself, be kind to yourself. That's the most important thing when you're going through grief and loss, is be kind to yourself. Even if I want to take things slow, I will allow myself to take things slow. It's important to be kind to yourself. Because if not, this process will be more hard than what it is already for you. All right. So in whatever ways you can, and also if you feel like you're really struggling, please remember that there is always help available for you. In whatever ways, if you want to reach out to your friends, your families, or even if you want to reach out to professional help, there's always help available. Sometimes it might be difficult to do things alone in our life. For example, sometimes it might be difficult to just get better without any help, right? That's okay. That is okay. It only makes you human, that is suffering, that is struggling. So in that place, please reach out for help. And if you're someone also, if you're someone that has experienced grief and loss, or that you are still experiencing grief and loss, and if you're struggling, you can reach out to me as well. It could be through comment, or if you want to message me, that's even okay. If whatever is easier for you. Or if you want to reach out to me on my Instagram, I've got an Instagram profile. It's on the same name, the Mental Health Memoir. I know it's a big name. A lot of people have told me that. But yeah, if you want to reach out to me through Instagram as well, I'm more than happy to have a chat with you and help you in whatever ways I can. Or let's say, in other words, we can help each other. So please remember that, grief and loss can be painful process, can be a painful experience, can be overwhelming experience, can be a hard experience, but it definitely gets better. It definitely gets better with time. With time, you definitely, I guess, learn to live with that grief and loss. And if you feel like I'm struggling more than what I had anticipated, or I'm struggling very badly, again, you don't have to go through this alone. You don't have to do this alone. There's always help in any way. Okay, so please reach out to help. So I think that will be okay. That will be it for today. like I said, it was not very structured. I mentioned that in the beginning of the session that it won't be that structured. So I will definitely, I guess, speak about grief and loss in the future episodes. No doubt on that. I will speak about that. This is also a topic that is very, very that I'm also very interested in. Like I said, I I focus a lot on anticipatory grief, and I guess how to I guess work on grief and loss process. So I will definitely be back in one of the next episodes. Like, again, I'm not saying it will be just straight away, because I've just uh, spoke about it in our episode for today. So I'll definitely be coming with grief and loss in one of the few episodes. One of the episodes in the future. So thank you so much for listening to me till here. Again, highly, highly, highly thankful for your time and for giving me your time and listening to me. So, like I said, if you want to reach out to me, you always can. I'm more than happy to listen to you or help you in any way that I can. So please reach out to me if you want to. So that was it for today. I will be back again with another episode in the mental health memoir podcast. So today we spoke about grief and loss. If you got any suggestions for me, or if you got any ways that or any I guess helpful strategies as well, you can again drop in the comment section. So I will be back again with another one. Till then, please look after yourself, after mental health. And again, if you ever need help, please reach out for help as well. All right. So till then, take care and stay safe, and I will see you soon. Thank you.